I know that there are moments in my life when I feel a need for literature and only for literature. There are still things, and there will always be things that only literature can do.
Hvis man er heldig, så har man en mor som læser bøker. Og hun bestilte alle disse her bøker som hun læste, og så la hun det på sitt nattbord. Og så gikk jeg inn som gutt, og så tok jeg de bøkene for å se hva min mor læste, og hva hun tenkte. Altså den nysgjerrigheten på sin mor.
I think I grew up in what you can call a real liberal family, because first of all, no one said anything if you were late night reading. And secondly, no one asked what you read. And that is to me a good definition of what is a liberal family.
Jeg reiste veldig mye med min mor, og av og til var min mormor med, av og til var hun ikke med, men jeg fikk mormor sendte meg alltid bøker, og jeg var alltid på nye steder, nye skoler, og var kanskje litt var nok ganske ensom mye, for jeg var alltid den nye jenta i klassen. Men da hadde jeg alltid en bok. Så, og det var jo et sted jeg kunne gjenkjenne ting som jeg trodde at jeg var alene om. Og det husker jeg som en stor og fin ting. At hvis jeg kjente på en ensomhet, eller at jeg var redd for noe, eller at noe var merkelig, så kunne jeg finne igjen det i bøkene.
It's a relief to me to open a book by a writer I love. Suddenly all the noise of life and the small talk and the pettiness and the things that are inessential, they suddenly drop away. You open a book, I don't know, open Knut Hamsun's Hunger, or open a book by W.G. Sebald, or whoever you love, Thomas Bernhard. Everything that doesn't matter is gone in an instant. And you're in a world where everything matters.
I think that the best accumulation of knowledge is born out of genuine curiosity. So on the very few occasions that I found myself in a classroom talking to students, I always say, follow your own nose. One text will lead you to the next, one image will lead you to the next image, a painting may lead you to a book, but follow your own passionate curiosity. Don't allow yourself to be told what to think or what's good or what's great with a capital G. This can only mislead you. I think people have to learn from the inside out, not the outside in.
Og sånn er jo lesningen. At lesningen har sin egen logikk. Du kan begynne hvor som helst. Du kan begynne der, eller du kan begynne der, men før eller siden så kommer du til å lese Thomas Mann. Og før eller siden kommer du til å lese Marcel Proust. Og før eller siden så kommer du til å lese Marguerite Duras. Og før eller siden så kommer du til å lese Peter Hanke. Så hvis man leser meget, altså hvis man bruker hele sitt liv på lesning, så kommer man til å komme til de forfatterne.
Und dann nach 45 war für mich die Entdeckung all dessen, was während der Nazizeit verboten war. Im Bereich der Literatur wie auch in der bildenden Kunst. Ich habe das wie neu erlebt, obgleich das waren Klassiker, moderne Klassiker, die ich zum ersten Mal las. Döblin, Kafka, die amerikanischen großen Autoren wie Faulkner und Hemingway, die wurden vom Rowohlt Verlag auf Zeitungspapier als Edition auf den Markt gebracht. Das waren sehr, sehr prägende frühe Leseerlebnisse nach dem Kriegsende. Und auch die Entdeckung, dass in der Zeit, in der ich eigentlich, nachdem alles, woran ich geglaubt hatte, zerschlagen war, ich suchend war, haltlos war, merkte ich auf einmal, dass es die Sprache ist, über die ich mich als Deutscher definieren kann.
And chiefly, I think, for me, the language is pleasurable to a reader. I mean, a reader finds it pleasurable to read a description and think she or he can identify that out of life. But they also take pleasure in the fact of seeing that it's made up of all of these words which can be put together in such a felicitous way as to become almost but not quite invisible. So the complexity of that kind of dual medium experience is very pleasurable for a reader, and it's something that we all, as people who live on the earth, are better if we know. We're better if we know. We're better if we know that we look out a window and we see the surf, but that we also see the window. We also see the droplets on the window. It's in an attempt to make lived experience be more valuable, to be more morally good, and to be alert to it.
Så från början trodde jag att det var riktiga världar. Jag visste ingenting om författare, att det fanns författare. Men så småningom gick det väl upp för mig att det var någon som hade skrivit det här. Jag tänkte på det som en värld som man går in i bara. Så ungefär som Alice går in bakom spegelglaset. Eller, nej, inte jag, och framförallt när hon går ner i underjorden. Att det fanns en annan värld, och den kunde man öppna i böckerna.
I think that if the reader can know the true story in the background, that it changes the reading. And I think it changes the reading for the better, because I think that there's something that happens in writing, that there's an actual act of transformation that occurs on the page in the writing. When I was writing about my father's suicide, I worked on the book for 10 years and I didn't know how to write about it. And I wrote too literally at first. I wrote about the day we found out he died, and so we're all crying, and it's impossible to read. But then I was writing the short novel that's in the middle of the book, and halfway through there's an enormous surprise where everything changes. And I didn't see that moment coming until I was halfway through writing the sentence. And so the next day I went back and I planned to cut that and continue with my plan. But I reread all the pages leading up to that moment, and it was like seeing them for the first time. Even though I wrote them, I saw all this pattern in them for the first time that was leading to that moment that I hadn't seen.
I think I recognized that it was a chance to create myself, to actually decide for myself who I was going to be. And that's an incredibly exciting idea. It's radical in a certain sense, particularly when you're young, you're 14 years old, and almost everything in your life is decided for you. Your parents decide, your family, your school, the peer pressure, your friends. There's this whole world, cosmos, that is pressuring you into a shape. And then you have this blank page. And on that page you can decide to become anything and say anything. And you show it to someone or you don't. And years later you publish it or you don't. But that possibility, absolute freedom, as far as you're willing to go, it's up to you, right? And this chance to become something, to invent yourself, I think for me has always been incredibly enticing. And to this day, it's probably the most compelling reason to write.
I think that the real artist is the child. Because if you remember back that when you were 4, 5, 6 years old, you know, you had an enormous belief in the fact that you could transform a stone into a car or a piece of wood into whatever. Now, then when you start school and you know what happens, rationality takes over. Maybe it's necessary. But later on, when you maybe eventually would like to become an artist, then you have to, in a way, reconquer the thing you had as a child. And I think that it has to do with a sort of connection back to what the courage you had as a child to ask the really, really difficult questions.
I brought poems, about 20 poems, and I read them to her and we talked about them. And in that moment when we together, mostly just her of course, but together, were confronting this, the biggest moment of life, which is death, we relied on poetry. And I think that poems and stories and novels are very helpful exactly when we most need language, in the most sort of dire or urgent or existential moments of life.